Dr. Ndudzo Chipo are here from us all the way from Zimbabwe today. Now, you also saw Chipo's bio, and I must say I've met Chipo. We know each other. She's a humble person, and there's a lot more behind this short bio that's rich of content. And, there's many things that Chipo, you haven't highlighted. But I think, maybe to summarize, you from Providence Human Capital. You recently, and that's October last year, graduated from our institute with a doctoral degree. We have the privilege of having your supervisor, Prof. Ronnie Lessem, here today, your co-supervisor, Prof. Alexander Schiffer, and then we also have a few of your colleagues here. When we look at Chipo, you a real ambassador for your country, for our continent, and the work you've done, and all the many years of experience are testimonial to that. You don't just pay lip service, you actually do, and you look at your current involvement with the youth and training of that. And I see on weekends you're actively supportive for a certain soccer team that I think you will have many co-supporters here as well. But it's an honor for us, Dr. Ndudzo, to have you here this afternoon. And
thank you.
To share with us a little bit more about the role of entrepreneurship in African Pacific, where you're coming from, involvement, the role of female entrepreneurship in the continent, and how we need to think differently and approach things in a different way to also align with our understanding of graduateness, or what we discussed earlier on the whole thing about groundedness. So where should we ground ourselves? What's our roots? Where do we take it? So Chipo, we're listening with open ears, and if we have questions, I think let's save them towards the end.
Thank you very much, Prof. HB. And thank you. I would like to acknowledge my professors who are here, Professor Samanyanga Lessem and Professor Alex. Thank you very much for attending. I think for me, I believe that the word entrepreneurship is a very interesting word. I think first and foremost, and it's something that has a totally different definition from different contexts. And I know my topic is on female entrepreneurship in Africa. And I like the fact that you gave me that topic to say Africa, because I think the Africanness of it brings a whole different perspective to the definition. So in my case, I'll start by just talking about what this Indian businessman once said. He was speaking at a graduation, and he said, being an entrepreneur is like there are two ends. These two ends are asking each other, what would you love to be if you were to be given an opportunity to be anything else? And one of the ends said, I would like to be the richest ant in the world. I want to be the richest ant in the world. The other one says, there are three of them actually. Then the second one says, I would like to be the most wise and the fastest ant ever. Then the third one is just sitting there, and the two ants ask, and the third one says, I want to be a butterfly. So they look at the ant and say, butterfly? But we are ants. And that is the description of an entrepreneur, to become a butterfly. So you become different. You become whatever you perceive yourself to be in whatever context. So that's exactly what the ant said. And that's my definition of an entrepreneur.
Beautiful.
And I look, yes?
Beautiful.
And I look,
yeah, beautiful.
Thank you. Then I look at the definition of a female. And I say, a female, if you look at the old philosophers would tell you about the Aristotles of this world would talk about a female is almost next to a domestic animal. And I know a lot of women don't want to hear this, but they are the people who influenced a lot of our education. A lot of our learning comes from these philosophers. And I think women philosophers then entered into the space of philosophy in terms of education later in the years. And when you look at it and what has really informed the world about a female, it is those concepts, and they are stuck in minds of almost everybody, including the females themselves. Then we bring in, I call Chimamanda Ngozi, yeah, one of my favorite philosophers. I call her a philosopher because she talks about the danger of a single story. And that single story is describing a female and describing a male and describing an African and describing a graduate and describing when a person is a whole lot of other things. So from a female perspective and from an entrepreneur perspective, and what I am doing as an entrepreneur, I'll then take my own definition of an entrepreneur is understanding who you are, seizing opportunities, running with opportunities in your context. And the reason why I talk about context a lot, it's because even when I was studying my thesis and how I started being an entrepreneur, which I think I started from a very early age, is you wake up in the morning and you know you are an African, you live in Africa, and today's Africa Day, so it's quite interesting that today's Africa Day. You wake up and you realize that you live in a society that says a female is this, and you literally just laugh it off and say, I'm human first, then I'm female. And I know that's very difficult, but I was speaking to a group of women last week and I was saying to them, you're an employee first, and then you are a female. And there was a lot of groaning and moaning from that statement. But so as a human first, and then as an entrepreneur second, or as a woman second, I say that you start from your groundedness. That's what we talked about earlier. So there's a gene theory and a gene model that some of you are familiar with and some are not, but I'll quickly talk about it as I talk about my entrepreneurship journey. And I use quotes for entrepreneurship, like I said. It's a word that's got different meanings to different people and to different contexts. So for me, my providence-ness and my groundedness and my entrepreneurship actually became more clear. I think I've been an entrepreneur all my life because I did sell certain things. I did work in different environments. I did seize a lot of opportunities. But the clarity of it came from this amazing model, which is the gene model, which I accredit to both Professor Lessem and Professor Alex Schiffer, which really talks about the whole you and how to become, not necessarily an entrepreneur, but how to become that which you want to be, whether you want to be a butterfly or you want to be a fast ant or you want to be a rich ant or whatever it is that you want to be. So that becoming is what I'm going to talk about. And this really starts from how you are raised and where you are raised from. So the location of where you come from is very important. And there's a whole lot of philosophy about being brought up in Africa and the locus of where you're coming from. Where are you actually grounded? Where do you come from? And for me, being a Zimbabwean, a Karanga, and being a woman has got a lot of bearing of what I've achieved and what I'm transcending to become. And this is coming from the southernness, from a global south. Africa is in the global south. So that southernness that I'm brought up in has a lot of relational concepts around it. So a lot of us in Africa and a lot of us in Zimbabwe, and interestingly, coming from the southern part of the country, we are very relational people. We love people. We love making connections. We love being part of family and groups and assisting each other. So that southernness that I have, and being born in that south part of the country and being born in Africa, for me has a lot of bearing of what has made me into an entrepreneur. Because I love people, because I love to help, because I love that relationship between myself and other people, I get to want to help, to come up with solutions that help my fellow men and that help my fellow women and my fellow colleagues in the workplace. So that southernness is very, very important. And if I can just explain a bit of, just a little story about my southernness, is I've gone to the extent where I've said there's no such thing as nepotism in Africa, because everybody's my relative, my cousin, my brother, my sister. And when they graduate, we're talking about how when you become a graduate, what attributes should you have? When they graduate, the most important thing is they're looking for a job. And I say, because of my southernness, I will not let a fellow uncle, cousin, friend not have a job because there's such a word as nepotism. Again, another definition of nepotism that should be qualified and said it has to be contextual because of where we come from. So that's my southernness, and that's how we work at Providence. It's just to say, as Providence, we are relational people, we are loving people, and we want to create an environment where everybody belongs and we're a family. I then move on, and I'm using this model so that you can understand how I'm becoming whatever it is that I want to be. So, and this southernness in itself, I'll go back to that quickly so that I can just tell a little story about how I became an entrepreneur. When I joined a company called InScore, I basically was in the finance department, and I was working as a finance manager, and I got promoted and all that. And I did fight a lot with my previous bosses. I always was brave enough to answer or say something, which I believe, and this is not being a female, but being a human. If you want to become an entrepreneur, you need to be brave. You need to question. You need to be curious. So we are in Curiosita today. You need to constantly ask, constantly feel uncomfortable with where you are. So for me, that was the first step. I was involved in a lot of things. There was a big issue. A lot of my colleagues who are listening to this forum will know. Again, it was coming from my southernness, got involved in a lot of helping people, which then turned out to be, it turned out to be capitalism versus socialism, and we clashed, and I had to move out. So number one, you're also pushed to be an entrepreneur, whether it's to survive or whether it's to, you now don't have a job, whatever it is, sometimes you're pushed into entrepreneurship. So I move from my southernness and go to my easternness. So from the south, you navigate to the east. When you navigate to the east, it really talks about your spirituality of who are you, what do you believe in? Because a belief system anchors everything that you are. So being a southern woman and becoming east, there's a lot of religious people in Africa. I think Africa, someone said religion is the opium of the poor. I believe it to a certain extent, and it's a conversation for another day. But this spirituality that I'm talking about is the consciousness of saying to yourself, every time you're doing something, and you have to practice this. If you want to be a good entrepreneur, you've got to practice this all the time. You've got to reflect on the things that you're saying. You've got to reflect on the things that you're thinking. You've got to read a lot. You've got to be conscious about how you are navigating a deal, how you are meeting people. What is it that they must be feeling? Be like them, live in their space. Jesus, the Lord says, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. So all those belief systems, as you're consciously evolving, as you're consciously becoming this entrepreneur that you are, you need to be so conscious about the other person. You need to always be thinking about the other person. And that's how you seize opportunities. So for me, here is my southernness, my relationships. So my relationships do get me business. I talk to people, they love me, I love them, I create the opportunities. So my relationship to marketing, as other people will say, to sales and marketing, for me, it's community activation. It's community, it's talking to the community. So I've decided that I'm not going to market and have a sales and marketing department. I'm going to have a community development, a community building department, a place where people communicate, where people feel with the community, where they grow together with the community. And from there, we move together with the community and Providence and the people of Providence, the employees and myself, and we move on to the spirituality. We have created what we call Rumoko circles. So our Rumoko circles is every morning, and that's borrowed from a Rumoko, another Christian concept that especially the Anglicans and the Methodist people actually use, where you wake up in the morning and you go and you arise. You're waking up, you awaken your senses, you awaken your spirituality, you talk to God in the morning. So we do that at Providence every morning. So every morning, we're doing it virtually at the moment, but every morning we meet as a group. We are in a circle, we do a Rumoko circle, and in that Rumoko circle, it's very structured. We make sure that we discuss, it's almost like a pre-production meeting, for lack of a better word, but we meet there and we talk consciously evolving. So it's not when we're talking about politics or we talk about a certain thing that has happened, we are saying, what part do you play in this? What part do you play in making sure that Zimbabwe is moved forward, in making sure that your family has moved forward, in making sure that Providence has moved forward, and in making sure that yourself as an individual has been awakened? So we then, so we do those and we discuss, and every single person in the organization is an opportunity to come up with a topic that they've investigated, and we discuss it and we say, what is the solution? How do we make sure that this that we have discussed in Rumoko has evolved us? We believe that anybody can believe in whatever they perceive God to be. We believe that there is a spiritual being. I'm a Christian, so I believe in God and monotheistic way of doing things. So I'm a Christian, but we've got different people, African traditional religions. We've got all these different concepts in the organization. And we say we respect every single person and their belief system. Because what we also discovered is every single religion, whether you're a Buddhist, whether you're Christian, whether you believe in the African traditional religion, whatever it is that you believe in, there are certain fundamental truths that do not change. So kindness doesn't change. Honesty is the same. All those good attributes, that value systems that are respected, all those, you find them in each and every religion. And that's why we respect everybody from wherever they come from. We also, from there, because I'm looking at the time and I'm really trying to move forward and people can then ask questions, is the north. So you navigate from your south and you go to your north, to your east, and from your east you navigate to your north. Again, global north, and I know this is, every person has also got a north and an east and a south and a west. But in the global north, the northern countries that you know of would be your Scandinavian countries, the Swiss time. I had a seminar last week, and there were 2 white women that came to the seminar, and there were 29 black women who came in. And I'll tell you, it was the funniest thing that ever happened, because the white women came on time. They literally were there at 2:30. That's when the meeting was starting. All the Black women came at 4:45, 3:45, and we were laughing about it and saying, this is BMT, this is Black men's time. But we had a lesson around that we do not respect as African businesses and African enterprise. We do not respect this world, this northern world, which is very, very important to our growth. As an entrepreneur, it's one thing that I never used to respect. I never used to respect time. I would argue about it being a human construct and it's not money, it's not this. I would argue with my professors about documentation. They keep pushing me to document things and argue about it. But now I realize how it is very important to tap into your northernness, because there is a part to play in terms of your systems, in terms of your processes. I was talking to my cousin. He's a miner, he's a geologist. I think he's in this, he's joined in, and I think it would be interesting for him to meet with Becky and Gibson after this. He stays in South Africa. And I was saying to him, as a geologist, he's very time conscious, he's very straight and narrow. And I was saying to him, I need to actually work with you as an entrepreneur, because you need to actually look at the systems of Providence and see how you can structure it in such a way that we follow systems and we follow documentation and we follow time and we follow this, because that also helps as an entrepreneur. Because most of the time, entrepreneurs are called indigenous, and our indigenousness again falls into the southern realm. And after the southern realm, we'll go to the eastern realm. And then after that, we just literally just playing around those two realms, the southern and the eastern. And we never navigate to the north. So I am saying, if you want to be a good entrepreneur, you've got to go around the whole model, the whole circle, the whole world. You need to navigate the whole world. So my north, which I know Providence is in a bit of a issue with, we're not up there yet, but we're working towards it. But the moment I started working towards my north, our profits improved, our systems improved, the way we related to people improved, the way we scheduled things improved, and that helps as an entrepreneur. So yes, most of us will be entrepreneurs, whether it's for survival, whether it's for you're being pushed into entrepreneurship, whether it is that you want to become, whether you're an entrepreneur, even in an organization. If you don't tap onto your north, it becomes very difficult. And then from your north, you go to your west. And the Western world, again, globally, is your Americas, your Northern Americas, your Trumps, your shoot, you act, you run, you are brave. You are not scared of anybody, and you basically do. It's an action-packed world, as we know. And from an individual and from an entrepreneurial perspective, that West is the brave part of who you become. So you are very relational, you are very spiritual, you then have these processes and systems. But if you keep them, which is what most of us do, we then document our thesis, we then document our processes, we then are scared to take the opportunity, to seize that opportunity. So the Americans seize the opportunities. They'll jump in and for me, my Westernness was very good, because I then seized a lot of opportunities. And every opportunity that you seize, you know somebody dropped it. And I also would like to say to those who want to be entrepreneurs or those that are all in there already is, remember, for you, when it's very simple and it's not so complicated to seize opportunities. They are normally as close to your hand's reach as they can be. If you just look and you say to yourself, like if you look at Providence, I have been very specific about the business and said, this business is not going to be difficult. We are not going to scratch our heads and try and do things that we can't do. We're going to work with people, and we are going to try by all means to work with SMEs, The bigger organizations, yes, will work with them, but sometimes they really strain you and they pull you and they want you to become something else. And then in the process, they also want you to charge less than you should. So after all that time that you've put in, let's do something that's in our reach, easy to do, easy to grasp, helping our communities and having fun at the same time, but seize opportunities. And that's the Western part. And in all this, right in the middle of this world is your value system. It's your Ubuntu. I've had a few discussions with my colleagues where Ubuntu, I think you are because I am because you are. And in Shona, Unu is your character, your character. Now you're Unu, this child has a character. So that is what glues everything together. That glues your world together. So that really is how, as a female, I'm an entrepreneur in this environment. Statistically, we know that a lot of women are entrepreneurs in Africa. We know this. A lot of our mothers are entrepreneurs. They sell to send us to school. They do all sorts of things. My mom was my greatest teacher. As an entrepreneur, she sold jerseys, she baked, she did a lot of things just to send us to school. That's another definition of entrepreneurship. I know I always laugh at universities that teach entrepreneurship because I don't know what they're teaching. So I've sat in classes and I'm thinking, can you teach entrepreneurship and what are the subjects? And then afterwards, the same graduates are then sent to our workplaces to look for jobs. And that disconnect worries me. So a few graduates who come to Providence for interviews, I say to them, are you sure you're supposed to be looking for a job? Should you not be creating jobs? What is it that you have been taught? You were talking about the graduates and what attributes they should have. And I think I wrote on the chat that graduates should understand that the world owes them nothing. Yeah. Because they must know that the world owes them nothing. They must know that population has gone crazy. In Zimbabwe, we're 6 million in 1980. We're now 18 million. And that is a reality. And in terms of jobs, they're not there. In terms of, so almost for me, I always describe universities as places where at least the kids are growing and maturing because we have nowhere to put them as governments and as a universe. So, and then we create this. So in that space, we've got to tell them that being an entrepreneur is anything that you're doing that makes you have something to eat as well. So when you go and hunt and you get something, be a hunter. And hunt. And you can hunt from being a cleaner, it doesn't matter. So jobs, we've got what we call staffing solutions under Providence. Every job is important. When you look at developed countries, the jobs that they do, they've got dignity. They almost respect every job. So when our fellow Africans go to Europe or they go to I was going to say South Africa. When they go to other countries in Europe and in the States, they will do certain jobs that they wouldn't do here. But that which they are given, which is a living wage to a certain extent, and they bring home and the people go to school here, and then it's all a cycle that happens is entrepreneurship in its own way. They've actually left their places and gone to do something. When we define entrepreneurship as just starting your own business, I think we really miss the whole spectrum of what it should be. And a lot of people then decide, I'm going to start my own work. I'm going to decide to do this. Whatever it is that you're doing, it's enterprise. And when we respect every job and we look at it with dignity, and university graduates need to know this, when you leave university and because you're a graduate, it doesn't mean you're going to get a job as a manager or you're going to get a job in the office. you can get a job as a cleaner or whatever it is, and it's still enterprise. It's still working. It's still doing something. So for me, being an entrepreneur is becoming whatever it is that you're doing. I think that's the definition. I was talking about Adichie Chimamanda, and I was saying she talks about the danger of a single story. That's why I love stories, but I like people to listen to these stories from it's Chipo's story, then it's Ronnie's story, then it's Alex's story, it's Mary's story, it's Douglas's story, it's whatever story, because the danger of a single story is defining women, and somebody defined this and said, you must understand that women and feminism and marginalization and everything does happen, but in certain contexts, it's also the type of woman that you are, it's also the type of man that you are, it's also the type of workplace that you work at. It's also, there's so much context that surrounds an individual and an organization that it is so important to pick bits and pieces and not rely on single stories, which is glass ceilings, for instance. And I know a lot of women, we've argued about this with a lot of my female colleagues, is I don't believe there's a glass ceiling. I don't know who put it there. So for me, I don't believe there's a glass ceiling because I know I don't have a ceiling. When I look up, I've never seen a glass ceiling. I just see the sky. And I just can see that the sky is so never ending, and most of my relatives have gone to heaven, so that's where they're at. I've never seen a glass ceiling. So I feel, yes, there are instances where, as a human being and not as a female, another human being tries to pull me down, and I just stand my ground and become the Western cowboy that I should be. So I think we can discuss questions or comments. And
thank you, Chipo. I think that was a mouthful, and you made a few very important points, and I was observing the chat, and I think there's very positive compliments, comments, a few questions. There's a comment around nepotism. People say it doesn't exist. I see there's a question. We see people say yes. Omega say yes. It's uncomfortable where you are. And Janet make a point. If care and generosity are selectively applied, then surely it's problematic. I'm curious. So I think people ask the question. So what's my role into the community? How do I approach that? And you talk to some of that. Raymond have a very important point there. It's not a thing. Entrepreneurship is much more. You are born with attributes. You can also teach that, and it's a skill you acquire, and I think that you made. But I think there's maybe a question at the end when I saw that, what can I do to be successful if I look into the future? And you make the point, it's about these stories and learn from everywhere, but are there any wisdom or insights that you can give us and say, do the following 2 or 3 things? Because I see Yemu say, love this model, but just to maybe pointers for us to take it forward.
As a start, just acknowledge where you're at. So the place where you are at right now is very important. And whatever it is that you're doing right now is important. And when you acknowledge that and you're not aspiring to, when I say aspiring is sometimes you're sitting here and people are talking about starting your own business, and I want to start my own business and everything. As you're thinking like that, there's also opportunities that you're letting go in that space that you're in. And you have to know who you are. You have to know yourself. A lot of people are not, we're talking about decision making. A lot of people are not decision makers. A lot of people are not brave. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people are not go-getters, and there's still nothing wrong with that. And sometimes just knowing who you are and be content with that space that you're in is the first step. And once you're content and you've mastered where you're at, you can then gradually, it's almost automatic that you gradually become too big for the space you're in. So that's how promotions used to come about, and everything is, you just have experience, you just have knowledge of that which you're doing, and then you get bigger than the little hole that you're in.
Roy asked the question, so does governments do enough to promote women empowerment in terms of entrepreneurship? Talking to where you are, do you think that there's enough being done in that space?
I believe so. I believe that the world has opened up to women in entrepreneurship. And I believe that the world as a whole, I think almost every constitution in the world now talks about 50% representation and all these things, boards, they talk about those things. And I strongly believe that sometimes women don't want to become or take up those roles as well. Because in my country, for instance, you will get emails and emails on, do you want to become a board member? Do you want to be this? Because female representation. And I always say, and my point always is, no, for me personally, I say no because I don't have the time. I'm also a mom. I also have my children. And I also have other choices that I'm making outside of just being representing a number. So I say for those that want to become board members, that want to become entrepreneurs, most governments in the world have opened the space for people. And that's why I spoke about not seeing a glass ceiling. So my story, for instance, is my personal story is I've never been hindered to become an entrepreneur. And how I became an entrepreneur was really because I was, even in the workspace, I was an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur would then just evolve to an entrepreneur. But I believe that governments do that with the legislation, especially the legislation in almost every country.
I would love to listen to that conversation where you and Roy continue that.
I'm going to run very quickly through a few concepts here. Value creation versus job creation. Provenance, the origin of and the concept entrepreneur, which is Unternehmer. My German pronunciation is not what it should be. And also African humanism versus Western humanism. Why I'm raising this concept? We need to start from the grassroots level. Grassroots level, let's say from a school level, talking the language, value creation versus job creation.
Absolutely.
We leaned more towards job creation for many years.
Yeah.
Provenance, where things come from. We really need to be proud of who we are, where we are.
Yes.
If you drive on an entry towards Durban, every day there's a copper running towards Durban. But you can't get to Japan, someone tell you that this copper come from Zambia. Okay, I pass that spot. African humanism versus Western humanism. As we move together as let's say Zimbabwe and South Africa moving toward our democratic journey, how do we get to mix the two cultures? Okay. My last point is this. Is my last point. As somebody who did geology some stage, I believe that God has never created Pretoria. Pretoria as a city is not even as mineralized as the outskirts, the peripheral areas. But Pretoria pulls everybody to itself. We really need to do something to say, example, Zimbabwe, Zambia is so mineralized. What is it that we can do that somebody did to the area before it was named Pretoria that is pulling everybody towards itself? Thank you.
Thank you, Gibson.
A mouthful, Gibson. Chipo, you going to take a stab at that quickly before we wrap up?
Okay. So first and foremost, when he talks about the Western humanism and the African humanism and how we bring it together. So the gene model, which I was talking about, which is the grounding, the emergence, the navigation, and the effecting. So when we're talking about this, that is actually the answer to putting the worlds together. So we know that the West has got some goodness in it, and so does the South, and so does the East, and so does the North. So bringing the exogenous and the indigenous together is what this model is about, and that's why we took we actually conceptualized it and put and effected it in our organization. It's to say, you've got to have the best of both worlds, so to speak. So you take the indigenous, which is who you are, the Africanness, the Africanacity, everything that you are. And then you take what the West, which is the exogenous, whether it's knowledge, whether it's systems, whether it's the humanity, that the sense of assisting each other and all those other things, you put them together. And you can only put them together if you use this model that I'm talking about, grounding. Be grounded. Image consciously, live consciously, think, thought, very important. Then navigate, look at knowledge systems. How do you put your relationships and your spirituality into something that is systematic, that will help you act, which is now your West. So that's that.
Thank you, yeah. Chipo. I want to thank both Becky and yourself. I think you probed many questions. We got a lot of answers and insights and a little wisdom, but also many more questions in our mind, and that I found very valuable. And on an Africa Day celebrating that, I cannot think about a better discussion that we have, where we actually say we need another hour and a half for me, which is beautiful. So this is definitely a discussion that's not done. There's a number of comments in there. We all followed that. I think that triggered that. They positive, they compliment. So I want to really thank the guest speakers, Chipo, Dr. Ndudzo, and also Mr. Becky Ndukane. And then specifically for everybody that participate here this afternoon. And I know many of you haven't asked a question, didn't post a comment, but you were here, you showed up. And for those then that also then posed questions and gave some comments, it's really it's important that we have the discussion. I think this is a discussion we should continue. We're not done with it yet. So thank you to all. But to Dr. Ndudzo, Chipo, it was a privilege having you here. And then as we then conclude the session, you're welcome to switch on your camera, say goodbye, and enjoy the afternoon.